This video will contain spoilers for the Netflix original animated series, Sonic Prime. If you've clicked on this video, I'm assuming you've either already watched the show or you just don't care about spoilers. But if you do care about spoilers, but you clicked on this video anyway, you're in for a treat, I guess. Sonic the Hedgehog was a powerhouse icon in the 90s, spawning countless games, comics, animated shows, and movies. While the franchise has had its massive hits and misses as far as games go, the characters remain beloved by an innumerable amount of people. It is hard to find a more diehard fan base of that than Sonic fans, with them defending the franchise even through the most worst of flops that you can imagine. As someone born in the 90s, Sonic and his ragtag bunch of friends and enemies have been very close to my heart for pretty much my entire life. While I haven't been as nearly as dedicated to the franchise as I was when I was a child, I do partake in Sonic-related content when a new 3D game or a cartoon drops, which is how I found myself watching Sonic Prime and gaining some particular opinions about the show. Hey there, I'm here to interrupt your regularly scheduled entertainment. For those of you that don't care about spoilers and clicked on the video, even though you haven't watched the show yet, Sonic Prime is about Sonic traveling to different alternate universes in order to collect shards of a giant rainbow crystal called the Paradox Prism after, he and Eggman kind of broke it. In these alternate universes, he meets alternative versions of his friends, and they help or hinder his progress in collecting these shards, while this, family unit of Eggmans also race to find the crystals. Generally, as a middle of season 3 watcher here, I'm enjoying the show a lot. As far as the writing and plot goes, I acknowledge that the show is for 10-year-olds. The dialogue is a little cheesy at times, and it's a little annoying how often the characters just kind of talk out loud to themselves, but again, it's a show meant for 10-year-olds, so I can forgive some of the aspects of the show being more telling and less showing with what's going on. That being said, though, I can also say that the show is basically baby's first plot. And what I mean by that is that the show is a good, introduction type show to kids just starting to, wean themselves off of episodic type shows and are gaining more interest into, serialized content. I think the show is a pretty good, beginning point to introduce them to more complex plot lines and things that they have to remember over a period of time. Cheesiness aside, I can respect the show's writing for who it was intended for overall. As far as the animation goes, I'm a little indifferent towards the general character models and environment. The models, while smooth, are overall low textured and not very complicated and remind me a lot of the Sonic Boom show in terms of quality. I would expect to see models like this in a game, which I'm kind of disappointed that this isn't a game, to be honest, because I think it'd be really fun. So it's not entirely a bad thing that this reminds me of a video game, but it's also not anything completely worth winning awards for, if you catch my drift. Despite the simplicity of the character models, I do have a lot of respect towards the animation on its own, with a lot of dynamic squish and stretch physics being enabled during action sequences that you might not otherwise see in a 3D model type show. I can't say with any certainty on my end, but I have seen several industry people remark that the Hotel Transylvania series actually really revolutionized how 3D animation has been developing to mimic classic animation techniques more and more. Overall, it's just really nice to see 3D animation turning more towards these fluid and actually unrealistic movements to show more interesting dynamics. And now, since all of my general compliments are out of the way, let's get into the more spoiler-specific territory, including, my issues or gripes that I have with the series. So first of all, the egg console is, pretty lame to me. Why introduce a bunch of alternate dimensions only for all of the Eggmen to be from, the same plane of reality? It would have been more interesting to see a feral caveman type Eggman in the forest dimension, or a black bear type pirate in the ocean area, but instead we just get these different life stages, all from the same metropolis area. And while I appreciate that they display their own unique characterizations, they're kind of lame. More lame than just Eggman by himself. I'm not done with the third season yet, but I theorized that when the Paradox Prism initially exploded at the beginning of the show, it split up Eggman into these different variations, and when everything is resolved, they're all gonna like combine into normal Eggman again, but we'll see. Honestly, that theory is pretty much what I've been thinking with all of these like variations of like all of the characters in the show, that they all represent different aspects of the characters, and that's why a lot of them seemed like a little one note in the beginning, but start to like seem to have a little more nuance once they meet Sonic and are like exposed to the prism energy that he contains. Although that theory might be like a little more complicated than what like I would expect for the age demographic that the show is intended for, so like who knows. And speaking of the characterizations of like the other people, I think they're fun, but one note for many of them, I actually think that the Pirate Knuckles Dread is actually one of the more nuanced of the bunch, with him trying to be a happy-go-lucky guy during his like introduction, only for his true nature, the more selfish personality, to emerge when introduced to the concept of treasure and achievement. Out of all of the alternative versions of the characters, I think that he's my favorite. That being said, this show is another iteration where they changed the characterization of some of the characters in order to fit into like this story. Through the years, Knuckles and Amy have undergone some of the most boring character changes I've ever seen, actually. When Knuckles is introduced, he's like a naive but loyal guardian who is quick to temper, but he also has this like air of melancholy to him, as he believed he was doomed to be alone with the Master Emerald for his entire life. And overall, he just was like a lonely but easily manipulated character, which I really appreciate that. And off script here, I appreciate that in the Sonic 2 like live action movie, they kind of reintroduced this concept of him being like more nuanced in that aspect of him being easily manipulated by Eggman, but also being fiercely loyal to like the task that he was assigned by his people. So we'll see how well they characterize the rest of the characters as like that franchise like moves forward. But as it stands with like the animated series and even some of the games, them changing Knuckles is now he's like punch hard, lift weights, dumb. They also changed like his overall naivety to just being a meathead, like a dumb meathead. It's kind of sad, really, which is why I thought that Dread's characterization was a nice change of pace to what we've been enduring for Knuckles. Amy, on the other hand, for me at least, my opinion, she's had like a lot worse treatment as far as the franchise like writers not knowing what the fuck to do with her. She started as someone just kind of obsessed with Sonic, right? Following him around, being annoying with her affections, and ended up becoming like a damsel in distress for him to save in a lot of situations. I should be happy that she's developed past that, but sadly, her character has been ridiculously inconsistent from game to game, show to show. From Sonic Adventure, she was like this stereotypical girly girl who loved shopping and wanted to go on dates, and as her story progressed in like her own playthrough, like when you play as her, she learned to stick up for herself and acknowledge that she shouldn't wait for someone else to save her, particularly Sonic, because duh. And she even learned how to help and save those less capable than herself. It was a sweet and meaningful development, actually, despite how short her playthrough was. Then you get her characterization in later games, like Sonic Adventure 2, where she's basically just there to be concerned for Sonic's safety because she isn't a playable character in that game. Sonic X, she was still like a stereotypical girly girl, but she was also kind of a nag who just lectured people a lot from what I can remember of the show. But then again, I watched the 4Kids dub of that show, so like the original Japanese version, she might have been like completely different, but who knows. Then you get Sonic Boom, where she was just annoying from the episodes that I watched, including her. They tried to make her more of like this independent girl boss, but
You know, Amy, anytime someone calls attention to the breaking of gender rules, it ultimately undermines the concept of gender equality by implying that this is an exception and not the status quo.
in Sonic Frontiers, she was arguably the most bland in my opinion, but at least Sonic didn't treat her like she was like this annoying and clingy like nuisance, right? And instead they actually seemed to have pretty decent chemistry between them, despite the fact that she was really boring. Another little off-script thought here, but like honestly with Sonic Frontiers, I actually thought most of the characters were really boring. Besides like, believe it or not, Eggman and Sage was pretty interesting to a degree. Sonic being the main character, he always has like this like bit of interest to him, but like everybody else in that game was just kind of there, I guess. Their like little storyline like relating to the little creatures that you save and everything was like but let's not get too focused on Sonic Frontiers because this video is not about that game. Anyway, back on track. Despite all of the iterations of Amy's character, she is pretty consistent in loving her friends and either worrying about their well-being or wanting to help them. Then you get Sonic Prime Amy, who likes the forest. I'm begging future Sonic writers to make this girl more interesting. Please. Like, I'm begging you. Like Knuckles, though, Amy's alternative versions have more interest to them, but nothing I overall really cared about, unfortunately. I actually didn't like Thorn that much at all because she felt like running off her friends and letting them starve to death was a better plan than trying to teach them, like, about moderation and conservatism or whatever for the forest. So that I get that they're alternate reality versions of the characters, but like how like different of like the character can you get with these while still maintaining like their core aspects, if you know what I mean. After we get past the fact that Knuckles and Amy change during like every reboot or every new story in the franchise, we get to characters that I didn't really care about being there at all, which was like Big and Rouge. Throughout the games, Rouge has been more of a like I'm in this for myself kind of girl, so I'm wondering what I missed during like the development of the franchise that would put her within the main friend group of the Sonic cast. And I also like recall people being confused when the promotional material came out as well, about like what's up with her? Why is she in the main like group now? Like what happened to Styx? What happened to like any of the other like female characters? Rouge and Big's inclusion just felt like they needed to fill the space, and neither of them really stand out as far as the storylines go. Particularly Big, actually, like especially Big. He's just kind of there. Rouge does a little as a rebellion leader in like the Metropolis zone, but that is also like one of the more boring areas within the show, and everyone within that area is obviously outshined by Nine, that Rome's iteration of Tails, and also the actual main antagonist of the show as far as season 3 is concerned. So, having an iteration of Tails being the main bad guy is actually a concept I really, really like from this show, especially if my theory about like all of these alternate versions of the characters just being different personality aspects of the main characters, if that turns out to be true. It would be a cool thing to explore Tails' internal selfishness towards his friendship with Sonic and how that can work out like with Sonic and him together when they all become like one piece again. Man, I really need to finish season 3. I just don't have the time. Don't tell me if my theory is right or wrong until the show is actually over, okay? Just don't spoil me. I know, like, this video is, like, full of spoilers, and, like, I was like, oh, if you clicked on this video, you're prepared for this. Like, don't spoil me. Anyway, as far as characters go, I want to highlight the inclusion of Shadow in this overall mess. Besides Sonic, Shadow is the only one who doesn't have alternative versions of himself running around. He is trapped outside of the realms in this nowhere area called Shatter Space. He directs Sonic at times through his, like, cross-dimension mission and operates sort of like an outside conscious form at times. Now, as a former edgy emo kid, Shadow was a big favorite of mine as a child. But since he was such a big favorite of mine, I have, to say that Shadow being in this show is weird to me. Actually, Shadow being an indie iteration of the Sonic series that doesn't include humans besides Eggman is strange to me. Shadow's origin is that Eggman's grandfather created him in an experiment that was meant to find a cure for his granddaughter Maria from a terminal illness. Specifically within his introduction game, Sonic Adventure 2, and that game before that, normalist humans were just seen pretty frequently throughout the game and just kind of existed, like coexisted with like the Sonic characters, right? Now, with his inclusion in Sonic content that doesn't feature humans beyond Eggman, what is his origin story then? It made sense for him to be in like Green Hill and stuff in Sonic X, like the animated anime, whatever, with the plot of that show being that Sonic and friends were from like another world and they ended up having legit space travel like from place to place later. But I don't think that's canon within like the show or many of the games actually. So like, is Green Hill on Earth within the series to have Shadow? Is Eggman just like a lone colonizer from another section of the world? Anyway, speaking of the lack of humans in Sonic Prime, I actually want to mention the lack of, well, anyone else within these alternate dimensions. It is actually probably my biggest criticism of the show overall, just how empty everything feels. We have a handful of named speaking role characters and not much else in terms of background characters or wildlife within the show. Even in the New York area, which is a metropolis, like a bustling city, we pretty much just get the same generic Sonic Forces looking character models occasionally. Like, I think it's like 4 or 5 character models is on repeat. Sonic as a franchise has a ton of colorful and interesting characters. I'm sure the number of characters is in like the literal hundreds, so why don't we get anything? We just get nothing. It would have given the series a lot more visual interest to even have some of the dozens of other characters from Sonic overall just in the background doing their own thing occasionally. They don't even have to have speaking role. It's just a little like nod towards like other fans that were watching the series besides like the 10-year-olds that just found Sonic for the first time. So the realms just seem so vacant and lifeless, which is why when they introduced the Grim as this like desolate and empty world, Nine's fresh slate to make a paradise for himself, it didn't feel any different from any of the other areas they had gone into, in my opinion. Everything seemed so empty, so why do I care that the Grim is like actually empty? I had very similar thoughts on Kingdom Hearts 3 actually, that like everything just felt really empty, but not about that game. This video is not about that game. But I guess regardless of like my overall criticisms of the show, I'm enjoying it so far for what it is. Again, it's made for 10-year-olds, so like I can't have everything I want and that's fine. The alternate dimension versions of the characters are fun and I actually really like how they managed to like tweak the designs like a bit so that all of these characters like have just a bit more interest to them and are unique to one another while still being undeniably the same person just in the alternate reality. So I'm hoping that by the time I get to finish the show, some of my theories come true, or, you know, I have like big revelations or whatever. I don't know. Definitely hoping I get time soon to finish it. But until then, I'll continue to theorize and hope that my theories aren't too complex for the show meant for 10-year-olds, I guess. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. That would mean the world to me. This video, like all of my content, is brought to you by Patreon, so thank you so much to Ippo, Alec, Ashley, Mel, and Brandy for subscribing. If you want to support me on Patreon or just check me out on other social media sites, all of the links will be in the description. Anyway, this is Minji signing off. Until next time.
I can't move on till I let go. I feel so lost, never at home. Need to be strong, every breath hold. 'Cause I can't move on till I let go. That I was losing